Hi, everybody. Dave Chalmers, Chief Commercial Officer at LMN, would like to welcome everybody to the webinar today, Improve Team Engagement by Jacki Hart. One housekeeping item just before we get started. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please use the chat window in the toolbar. Put your questions in there. We will get to those throughout the presentation, and we will also have time at the end of today's webinar to take questions as well. Let me introduce you to our guest speaker, Jacki Hart from Consulting by Hart. As one of Canada's most sought after business speakers, she brings with her a career chock full of landscape business management success. And like maybe some of you, her passion for landscapes and plants far outweighed her business management talent early in her career as a contractor. Her second career actually started in 2012, leveraging both her hard-learned business acumen plus her passion for helping entrepreneurs and managers succeed in their businesses. As a speaker, workshop presenter, peer group facilitator, and business coach, Jacki focuses on helping others grow both their leadership and their business management skills. And Jacki just recently launched a really incredible online business skills academy. You have to check it out. So she's always continuing to showcase her entrepreneurial spirit, finding new ways to make business improvement easy for all of the companies that she works with, and to showcase how passionate Jacki is about our industry. She also has over 150 published magazine articles to her credit. Simply outstanding. Jacki enjoys as much time as she can, either in her kayak or on her snowshoes, exploring the rivers and forests of the beautiful Muskoka, Ontario. So welcome, Jacki. Thank you so much for your time. I will turn over the controls to you, and away we go. Thank you, Jacki.
Thanks, Dave. I really appreciate it. And hello to everyone. Thrilled to have you here today, and really looking forward to spending the next sort of 40 minutes or so with you, just talking about team engagement and how we can improve. We've got a couple new things going on in the last 6 weeks, and we've kind of emerged into a time where the new normal has really quickly become the willingness and the knowledge to pivot and adapt quickly, to be decisive and empathetic all at the same time, and to be able to do that without looking back. We've all been dealing with the fear and anxiety of the global COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting stock market volatility, the changes it's made in each of our jurisdictions. Some of your businesses are able to be up and running full right now. Some aren't allowed to run at all. And this has just created a huge amount of chaos and fear. And I think what's really clear is that this has become a marathon. This isn't a sprint. I think we all came into this period of time thinking that this was going to be over in a few weeks, we'd be back to normal. So it's with any marathon, when you think about it, the importance is resilience. And this is a really important time for you to develop resilience in your team and in the way in which you lead your team. Knowing when to expend energy and when to conserve it has become increasingly apparent and increasingly important. Before COVID arrived in North America, professionals from coast to coast were wrestling with team engagement issues. Add this COVID-19 era on top, and a lot of you are panicking. And I hear it over and over again from clients who've been calling me. I spent the last 4 weeks talking people off the cliff. And it's the number one issue I hear about when I'm coaching businesses and speaking to people at conferences as well without the COVID pandemic. So when you add this into the mix, it's blanketed on top of our spring season. It's overwhelming to so many of you, and I realize that. Many of you are having a hard time figuring out a new plan that then changes in the next week, and then you have to kind of restart and start a whole new plan again. So what I want to do today is just go through with you some ideas about how to emerge on the other side of COVID-19 with a more engaged team than you had coming into it. And so one of the questions I wanted to make sure you think about is, what will you and your team look back on with pride a year from now as to how you've navigated your way through this and how you've changed the way you engage your team, even if COVID wasn't here? Okay. So those are important questions for you to ask and to think about how you're going to use this as an advantage to engage your team differently. This is the time for thinking differently. And Albert Einstein has a wonderfully famous quote that you cannot solve a problem using the same thinking that created it. And that couldn't be more true than right now. If you're still thinking the way you were 6 weeks ago about managing your team and managing your people and managing your business, you're in trouble. You need to think differently because you're solving different problems right now than you've had to solve before, ever. And so you need to be nimble and you need to be adaptive and you need to have a framework in order to figure out what that looks like and how you're going to pull that together. So I kind of created, for today's webinar for LMN, I kind of created what I'm going to call the 5 C's of COVID team engagement: communication, cash flow, company culture, a course of action, and compliance. So what do I mean by those 5? Let me break it down. Communication, right now you need to be thinking about, what are you communicating to your staff and when and how often? If you're out working, if you're not working, if you're partially working, what do your staff need to know? Because they're fearful as well. They're fearful about losing their job. They're fearful about paying their bills if they have lost their job temporarily. And they're fearful for their health and their family's health and the health of their coworkers and your customers. So what are you communicating to your team and how often? Lots of companies that I work with have jumped onto a variety of different online platforms like Zoom or GoToMeeting or Skype, and are using that to connect face-to-face with your team if you can't meet physically within your place of business or how you normally would meet together. So communication with your staff, equally important with your customer. It's going to look different working with your customers. So making sure that your team know how they can safely engage with your customers and how they can safely engage with your suppliers when a delivery shows up, for example. Knowing how they can load and unload equipment that maybe 2 people used to do together, now they can't do that and stay 6 feet apart. So how is that going to work? So starting to develop your policies and communicating them. I'll get to that a little more when I talk about compliance. But also communicating within the community how your company is responding to COVID. This is really important. The companies that are telling their suppliers and their customers and their team how you're putting policies in place, how you're putting processes in place to keep everyone safe, the measures that you're taking for hand washing and sterilizing tools and social distancing or physical distancing is crucially important, that everyone understands and sees how important this is to you and how you're protecting everyone's health. So communication and keeping your brand intact. There's lots of folks out there who are not as professional as you are because they're not listening to webinars like this and they're not learning, who are not communicating very clearly and are actually getting bad publicity and hurting their reputation by being out there working without safe measures in place. So the next one is cash flow. All of you are LMN fans, LMN users, and being able to adapt your budget within LMN to make sure that you understand what your costs are going to be, what your revenue is going to be, material, labor, equipment, and subs. Go through your whole LMN budget and think about how things are different, how your team is going to have to behave differently, and how they're going to have to engage in different behavior, and how much that's going to cost in efficiencies and how much it's going to cost in downtime. So think about your downtime percentage in your LMN budget, for example, and how you need to adapt that, and talk to your team. Track how much extra time it's taking them to do everything they need to do. So your cash flow and making sure that you're thinking about that differently is important, and you need to let your team know, because many of the staff that I've been talking to in the last few weeks of larger companies and small companies are afraid that the company's not going to remain viable. The boss is stressed, everyone's stressed, there's no sales, you're not able to go out and do work, and the bills keep coming in. The employees need to know. And if you want to keep an engaged team and keep your people on board, they need to know that you're focusing on your cash flow and that you're looking at the government programs that are available in your jurisdiction, and that you're really paying attention and making sure that you're doing everything you can to preserve their job and to keep the company viable and the team viable. So that's why cash flow is an important part of team engagement right now. You don't have to tell them everything, but you do need to make sure that they understand you've got your finger on the pulse and you're paying attention and you're positive and you've created a plan to go forward. So the next one is company culture. And company culture is probably the most important thing that all of you could look at more closely with respect to team engagement, with or without COVID-19. And so I think it's really important to think about your company culture and leverage the foundation that you have. Who are you? Who is your company? What are the non-negotiable principles and values in your company, those core values? What's the foundation of your company? What makes it different from everyone else's company? What is that culture that people experience when they're at your company? Make sure you use that and don't change who you are and who your business is through the next few months. Make sure that you stay true to your why. If you've ever read Simon Sinek, Start with Why. Make sure you stay true to that why right now, and that your team knows that the non-negotiable characteristics and the way in which you treat each other isn't going to change, no matter how scary and unpredictable things become, that you are going to keep and stick to your principles of service and your principles of valuing your team. The next one is course of action. This is the time to be decisive. If your team sees you wavering and one day you make this decision and tell them this, and then the next week you tell them that, and then the next week, if you bounce back and forth, you're going to lose their confidence. So for you to be able to make sure you've got a strong course of action, and yes, that course might change from week to week as our various governments change their minds, and as the pandemic curves change and flatten and spike, you have to be nimble and adapt and pivot and change your course of action, but do it in a decisive way so that your team sees your confidence. Even though you may feel like a duck, right? On top of the surface of the water, everything's good. But underneath, your little legs are going like crazy, trying to keep everything glued together. That's okay. But you want your team to stay engaged, you want them to stay loyal, and you want them to see that you are taking specific courses of action as things evolve through this pandemic phase. And then the last one is compliance. I have spent so much time in the last few weeks talking to extremely frustrated business owners from different jurisdictions, different cities, different provinces, different states, because your local governments are interpreting regulations differently. And so understanding what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do in your business services under essential and non-essential is really important. And then understanding what compliance measures are required in order for you to be deemed as safe and working within the compliance measures. So you need policies, you need to communicate those policies. And I heard something wonderful last weekend from David Wright, who is the president of Landscape Ontario, and he came on to a 2-hour Zoom meeting that I have twice a week with members of our peer network. And David Wright said, right now we need to think about ourselves as safety companies who provide landscape services. Think about that for a sec. So with respect to compliance, if you were to think about yourself as a company that provides safety to your team, first and foremost, think of how that will improve your team engagement. Think of how the message that sends and how much it protects your company from any sort of liability going forward. So I want you to think about the fact that you can't solve the problems that are in front of you right at the moment, let alone the problems you have with team engagement before COVID-19 came along. You can't solve either with the same thinking that got you to here. What got you to here isn't going to get you forward. It isn't going to fix your team engagement with or without the COVID pandemic. So here's the silver lining piece. And to our American listeners, I'll apologize to have Canadian currency up there, but that was what I chose to use because it's so colorful and we could use a little bit of color right about now. So there's some silver linings here. And this slide comes from a presentation that I used before COVID-19. And it's still valid. It's even more valid now. So I think the most important things that you can do is to amp up your recruiting message. If you can communicate to people who go to your website or who follow you on your socials, if you can communicate how important it is to your company to be compliant and to protect your team and to have decisions that are, have a strong course of action, to know exactly what you need to do, to have all the information be up to date with essential versus non-essential, amping up your recruiting message to attract people to your team because you're showing that you're a leader and you're showing that you care. This is a fabulous opportunity so that your team members, we'll get to this in a little bit, can say, I'm really proud to work here because look at what my company's doing. So the recruiting message and the message of how you're handling COVID-19 is really the same thing. Helping staff to manage their own budget is also really valuable. Many of us have laborers on our staff who live paycheck to paycheck. And right now they're under a huge amount of stress if your company's not up and running at full speed, at full potential and full steam ahead. So you could offer, using again an online video platform or one-on-one on the phone, an opportunity just to help talk to them about how they can manage their own personal cash flow. That's a great opportunity again to show them that you care and to be able to provide them with the resources that they need to make it through. And won't they be grateful that you stepped up and did that for them? No one else was doing it. Onboarding to include COVID-19 measures is a huge part of this year and probably will be a part of next year as well. And onboarding isn't that spring orientation meeting that every company has. Onboarding is a continual process. So your onboarding for COVID measures, I think, are a great way, again, to show how engaged, to build engagement and to show how much you care to your team, how important it is to ask them for feedback. How is this measure working for you? How is this method working for you? How's that process working for you? Where do we need different policies? Where have we dropped the ball? And did we remember to communicate that hand sanitizer has alcohol in it, 70 or 80%? It's highly flammable. So don't put hand sanitizer on and light a cigarette. So some of those onboarding things that you can do are just so important, again, at building team engagement through this. And then focusing on intrinsic value. And by intrinsic, I mean, those are the things that an employee experiences and feels as a part of your team. Not the money they get at the paycheck, not necessarily the uniform that they're wearing or the vehicle that they're in, but the intrinsic value is more of how they feel, how proud they are, and how hopeful they are. You can, if you focus on that, about what it's like to be a part of your team and why you care about, show them you care in a way that you've never showed them before. That's a way to build engagement through this period as well. It's also a way to build engagement even without COVID. And then government and professional development resources are also important. There are lots of resources, certainly on the Canadian side of the border, that are being offered to people for income supplementation if they've been laid off and their employment insurance has run out. There's different resources available. They're changing every week, sometimes every day. So if you have the administrative gas tank and power to make sure that you're really on top of what all those resources are and how they're, whenever they change, and communicate them to your team, send them the links, email them the links, show them how to fill out a form, go online with them and share your screen or share their screen and help them fill out a form if they don't know how to fill out a form. Help them with those resources and you'll really see how much this is going to really help you with team engagement. So what I want to do is just give you a little bit of a jolt and think about, this has got to do with team engagement at any time. When people are fearful, they resist change. If you want to change a process or a policy in your company and your team's pushing back and they might do the new one for maybe a week or 2 or 3, and then all of a sudden they go back to the old way, that's because there's fear and they're uncertain and they don't understand why they have to do this the new way. So if you look at people resisting change, look for fear and make sure that you understand that if you explain what the end goal is and all the steps that need to be taken to get there and what the benefit to them is for the company to reach that end goal with a new process or a new procedure, you'll get rid of the fear and you'll get people to engage in change. And then I wanted to talk a little bit as well about blame and acceptance. I've talked to oh my gosh, dozens of company owners in the last few weeks that are kind of going through the grieving process with this COVID stuff. And so the leaders in the businesses, when the leaders in the businesses lose their momentum and lose their confidence and focus on blaming everything else around them. Well, the government shut us down and now we can't do this and now we can't do this and that company's out, but they're not supposed to be. That kind of blaming things external to yourself over which you have no control keeps you stuck. And when you're stuck, you can't be creative, you can't move forward, you can't think straight, you can't be tactical, you can't be strategic, and you certainly can't lead and engage your team. If you find that your team is stuck, sort of blaming and judging what's going on, you need to bring them with you to a place of acceptance. You can only focus on what you can control and what you can influence, not on the things that you have no control over. So when you can accept, when you get yourself to a place where you accept, okay, it is what it is. Here we are. This is what's happened. And so now what are we going to do about it? And that's when you can start to move forward. And I've seen this over and over again in teams before COVID-19 came along, where as long as people are blaming an external circumstance for their own situation, they stay right there. They don't move on and they can't move through. So think about how willing you and the people on your team are to accept circumstances around you, whether that you can't control, and how willing are they to move forward. There are people in your midst, probably on your team, who like to blame others, who don't accept self-responsibility or self-accountability. They like to blame others. And those are the people who you got to be careful keeping in your midst at a time like this. You need people who can accept, okay, it is what it is. Let's move forward. Okay. So a little piece here about the elusive steps to team engagement. And these are the least things, the things that you least expected me to say today. And that's okay. Because these six things, are the way to mobilize team engagement. When you can share knowledge and gather the will of the people on your team to mobilize that knowledge and to move forward and provide a service or change a service or adapt to a situation, you've got success. When you can create hope and show humility to your team, you're going to create engagement like you've never created before. When the boss can stand in front of the team and say, you know what, guys, I messed up. I made a really bad decision and we went over budget on this project, or this happened or that happened, or I blew that quote totally. I don't know what I was thinking. I set you up to fail. When you can get yourself to a place of being able to do that with a team and show that kind of humility, you make it safe for them to do the same thing. And you will see accountability go from here to here immediately. So when you can build hope and open up the space for humility to be really dead honest, you're gonna have a really, really highly engaged team, way more engaged than you do right now. And then the last two pieces of this is acknowledging fear, which I spoke about on the last slide, acknowledging fear and doing what you can to reduce stress. And sometimes it's as simple as saying to someone, I noticed that you were, kind of fidgety, or I noticed that you seemed kind of off yesterday. Is everything okay? It's absolutely a pipeline to deeper and better team engagement. If your foreman, your supervisors, and your management team can have that kind of a conversation with people on your team. When you can acknowledge fear and help to reduce people's stress, you're going to get engagement. You're going to get a higher level of engagement than I think you've ever had before. It's creating the opportunity for everyone to come to work in the morning feeling hopeful, that they're being set up to succeed, and they're going to be learning something new, or they're going to work with a team that they really like, that get along. Um, they're going to smoke through and crush a budget and make sure that they get to the end of the job by the end of the day, or the end of a piece of a job by lunchtime, whatever that. If you set, they come into work every day and they're hopeful, and they can leave every day at the end of the day being really proud of something that they did, that they, the way that they were valued, the way that they contributed, you've got team engagement like you've never had before. I'm just going to take a sip of water here. Excuse me.
Hi, Jackie. I'm just going
Hey,
to jump
Dave.
in. We had a we had a question that came into the chat, as well as a comment. I'll start
Mhm.
with the comment first, and it was around likely your talking points, where you were highlighting things are changing and things are in constant state of change. Where if we look back 30 days ago, it's different than what April 23rd looks like. And
Mhm.
we're assuming May is going to be a little bit different than April. And their
Mhm.
comment was they found that the local, state, and provincial landscape associations were a great source of updated and current information, for them to understand what they should be doing to stay safe and so on. And they made mention of Landscape Ontario, so I thought we'd acknowledge that shout out. What are your thoughts? And I know you do a lot of work with associations as well, but um, that for sure has to be a great central point, because we know that those associations are working tirelessly right now as well, to keep everybody posted and updated with information.
They sure are. And you know what, we are so fortunate in this industry to have such strong associations. And you're right, Landscape Ontario, whether people listening here are members of Landscape Ontario or aren't, they have made available a COVID resource page that is chock full of resources to help get through. There's checklists, there's webinars like this, other webinars that LMN is sponsoring. There's all sorts of resources there for articles and portals to get into government programs. And I think I know that some other of the Canadian provincial associations are doing the same. They have a COVID page, and there's lots of, I think some of the American associations are also stepping up really, really strongly and offering those resources. It's just, we're so fortunate to have such active and caring associations behind us.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Okay, I'll jump into the question, and I think the question probably aligns with the slide that you have up.
Mhm.
And this all sounds great, Jackie, but do you have any concrete ideas that we can implement to improve team engagement?
Okay. Yes, I do. And you're looking at it. This is concrete. And I got an email from a guy in Vermont this morning, saying that he has a foreman who's he's having a real hard time getting the team engaged. And the foreman's a little rough around the edges and talks kind of sternly to the team. And did I have a tool or a resource, or could I suggest a book for the foreman to read? And there's lots of books out there to read, but what you need to understand is why you have to read it in the first place. And why you have to read it in the first place is that what I'm talking about, like knowledge and will and hope and pride and humility and managing fear and stress, this is all about, I'm going to use the M word, the millennial word, which is a great segue into the next slide. But this is all about the the paradigm shift. So forget COVID. Let's pretend we haven't even had COVID come along, no pandemic, and everybody's having trouble with team engagement. It's about multi generations clashing in the workplace, and about how people under the age of 40 need and want to be treated differently than people over the age of 40. And I'm going to put it right out there and make that generalization, because I think I'm pretty safe to make that generalization. There's always going to be 10 or 15% either side of that that's outside of the curve. But this is so simple. Getting team engagement, there's no magic wand. And this stuff sounds fluffy. And guess what? It actually works. It's, millennials, they need to be reassured and they need to be included. and they need to feel valued, and they need to feel as though their work and their effort, individual personal work and effort, is meaningful and appreciated and valuable. And as fluffy as that might sound, that's where we are. That's one of the biggest problems with team engagement. I did a 2-day workshop out in Banff, Alberta, in the mountains last March, and we spent 2 days talking about team engagement. And I actually worked 60 business owners through the 2 days to actually figure out how to implement this. And I've had such great responses from them over the last year since I did it last March about how they never understood the importance of understanding the difference of the generations and understanding the difference. So thank you for that question. And I'm gonna flip into here. Great segue. And I'm gonna read this to you. You can read it with me. The self-esteem education model of the 80s and 90s led students to expect the positive reinforcement for everything they did, from scoring the winning goal to properly handling safety scissors. Without that model of feedback continuing into the workplace, young workers, and I'm going to say under the age of 30 for sure, can feel lost and unsure of themselves and unsure of their performance. Okay, this has been highly researched over and over and over again to try to demystify the fact that millennials aren't lazy, and they don't have a sense of entitlement the way everyone labels them as. They are just clicking to a different tune. And if you want to engage with a team of millennials that are under the age of 40 in your company, you have to click to that tune. Many of you here on this webinar, I hope, are millennials, and you're under the age of 42 actually, and maybe you're the owners of the business and you get it. And maybe you're second generation running your business. So maybe you don't get it because you're trying to run the business the way your parents or your grandparents ran it, and it doesn't work anymore. So it's the millennial piece is so important to understand, because it's a generation clash, it's a paradigm shift, and this is one of the biggest problems with team engagement.
Oh, sorry, Jackie.
Yep, go
I'm
ahead.
just going to jump in with another question. And it you can probably field it better than I will paraphrase it. There's a few different sentences here, but the business owner essentially says, I feel like I'm engaging with these team members, have been generous with raises and pay over the course of the last couple of years, but engagement still not where we would like it to be. Um, I thought the money would help. I don't understand. Can you maybe offer some advice here?
Sure, I absolutely can, because you're not alone. You're in really good company. A lot of business owners, myself included, when I had my landscape company, thought that raises and benefits and getting to take the company truck home at the end of the day was going to just make people happier and engage in the company better. That worked 20 or 30 years ago for the most part. But again, I'm going to use the millennial word in a kind way and an appreciative way, that millennials have a much higher standard. And it is proven, research has proven over and over again, they will leave a higher paying job with a crappy boss and a lousy team where they don't feel as though their work is meaningful, and go to a lower paying job with a great boss and a great team where they can contribute and feel valued. So the raises aren't the magic wand. Feedback that's simple and often, that complements, is hugely important. You might have noticed in the last, I don't know, 6 months, that when you hear interviews on the news and you watch who's being interviewed by the anchor on your news channel, if the person who's being interviewed is, I'm going to say, between the age of 25 and 40, when they're asked a question, they will answer and they will start by saying, "That's a great question." There's the millennial piece. You compliment and tell someone that they're doing a really good job. If you think back a couple of slides, or back to sorry, this slide, not back a couple of slides, this slide, sorry. If you think about that, needing the feedback, right? Needing that feedback and knowing that they're doing a good job, it's the same thing. You ask a question and first you compliment the person who asked the question on what a great question it is, then you answer the question. Think about emails. I did some work, some branding work with a young woman. We did everything online. She was in Montreal. I'm in Central Ontario. And she was the first time I worked with someone that intensely for 3 months. We had meetings every week, and she was around 30. And every email started with a very positive, hope you're having a wonderful day. Isn't it lovely and sunny outside? There was some sort of preamble and conclusion at the end of every email that was positive and kind. And I would reply back to her and just hammer back a response. And she would immediately reply back and say, are you angry with me? So the filter of how different generations interpret information is very different. So, giving them raises and thinking that's going to engage them, that's not working. Feedback often and keep it simple. And when they ask a question, compliment them. That's a great, I'm so glad that you're curious about learning to do this better. Thank you. And let me show you how to do this. It might sound fluffy and it works. So being nice and complimenting someone when they come into work in the morning sets that engagement piece and opens the door. Okay. So great question. Thank you for that question. So a boss wants to pay for results and an employee wants recognition for their effort. If a boss recognizes effort, they'll get better results. Simon Sinek, a great thought leader. Some of you may or may not have heard of him. If you haven't, look him up on YouTube. He's got some great videos out there. And this is really important to think about. It ties back into the question, Dave, that you just asked from one of our listeners. And you, as a leader in a company, as the boss, as the owner, you want to get results. And the gap between getting those results from your team and directing them and wanting those results and setting the metrics and the targets is how you treat them. How they feel, that intrinsic value that they get from the company, it's how they feel is what's important. So as fluffy as this might seem, getting those better results is about making sure that your team feels valued, that they feel that their work is meaningful and has a purpose, and that they are able to make a contribution, that you're not just barking orders at them and treating them like a lawnmower jockey or a wheelbarrow monkey or 2 feet in a heartbeat. When people feel as though they're being treated that way, you don't have engagement. And if you have a tyrannical, authoritarian foreman, that's the person who you need to work on the most, not the team below him. Okay? It's the style and the willingness to engage and treat people like human beings with kindness and hope that is the key, the biggest key to team engagement. So I'm going to just let you in on a little sort of popular question that is going through the minds of probably most of your employees. WIIFME, what's in it for me? That's one of the number one questions that people are thinking of every time they click to apply on Indeed.com to send their resume to you. That's what they're thinking. Well, what's in it for me if I get this job? What's in it for me if I get this job? What does it say about me if I work for you? What does it say when I do a selfie in front of a company truck or out on a site and I put it on my Instagram or I put it on my Facebook page? What does everyone in my community think about me if I work for you? This is important. This is a really important piece about team engagement. Employee engagement now is rooted in an alignment of values, purpose, and personal fulfillment. Gone are the days that you can hire laborers to come and do whatever work you throw at them, and they show up every day. I think you've all proven that to yourselves. At least every company I've talked to in the last 4 or 5 years has, and I talk to hundreds every year, they've all proven it to themselves that you can't do that anymore because millennials are insisting that that's just not the way, that's not their paradigm. That's not how they're prepared to work and live their lives. They'll go and do different work and live in their parents' basement before they'll take a job like that. So, how do you treat your team? How will your employees answer, what's in it for me if I work for you? I want you to really think hard about that. When it comes to team engagement, you really, really need to pay attention to how do your employees feel about working for you? Because it matters more now than it's ever mattered in the history of your company. I guarantee it. It absolutely, this is what you've got to figure out is how happy are people to work for you? What are you offering them? And where are they getting the personal fulfillment? Because that's important. That's become so important. So I just wanted to give you a couple things to think about the cost of being short-staffed and not making these changes in your company culture and thinking about how you treat and how you're engaging people just because they're people, not because they have a certain skill set and a resume. You have a lower capacity to produce when you're short-staffed or when you have people who don't show up for work. Unpredicted, just they didn't show up. Think about the amount of total time you spend in a year in recruiting and training. The more we become safety companies, the more compliant we have to be with various regulations, the more that training takes. Who is spending the time on that? And what's it distracting them from doing elsewhere where they could be bringing value? So if you think about what is the actual cost of having a lower capacity to produce work, the inability for your business to grow, think about how many sales you've turned down in the last 2 years because you didn't have enough staff. If you'd had one more crew or one more this or one more that, you coulda. Where would your growth curve be by now? If you had had all of the employees with all of the skills showing up every day for the last 3 years that you wished you'd had. This is how important it is. If you actually sit down and do the math, you'll be shocked. I was shocked. I've done it with a few clients, trying to get them to change the way they think about team engagement and the way they think about structuring the dialogue and the culture and the way in which you give people feedback every day is, I guess the only way in order to make this shift is for it to hurt enough in order to know you really need to do it. So the next one is diminished brand. How many service failures have resulted in a lack of talent on your team? I've heard so many times people say, well, I can't find enough good people, so I'm just going to hire this guy. Or you keep someone on your team who's got a bad attitude, who's like a virus themselves, because you don't have anyone to replace them with. And you end up, I've got clients I speak to on a regular basis who have employees who hold them hostage. Like, oh yeah, he won't fire me. I can like show up at 10. He's not going to fire me. He hasn't got anybody to replace me. What does that do to your brand when that person, the job doesn't get completed on the time that you promised the client it would get completed on? You can't start the next project at the time when you promised that client you would start it because you're behind schedule. And what does it cost to fix? What does it cost when employees don't have the right training, have the right knowledge because you've got too much turnover and they don't stay long enough? What does it cost to fix those broken promises? What about the customers who never come back? What about the bad word of mouth? So this all comes down to team engagement. It all comes down to thinking about, all right, what is it actually costing me to not get this right, to not make this change, and to not understand what the people, my number one demographic of employees, 18 to 40, what they really, really need in order to engage. Okay, so future-proofing your team engagement. I wanted to give you an opportunity just to have a little checklist. Okay, we're almost at the end here, but just to have a little checklist. So, what's in it for me? Answer that question. Ask your employees, ask your best and your newest employees, what's in it for you to work here? Find out what that intrinsic value is, the stuff that they feel and that gives them confidence and gives them hope and gives them pride, as opposed to money and benefits. Money and benefits are important, don't get me wrong, but it's deeper than that if you want the engagement that everyone's looking for. How, in what ways do you allow them to contribute and do you ask them and invite them to collaborate, or do you just talk to the foreman and then the foreman talks to the lead hand and then the lead hand talk? Does everything have to go bing bang like through a pinball machine, or can everybody sit down on a bench and talk about it? How is each individual person making a difference? How is their thinking contributing to the team or contributing to the project or contributing to your brand or contributing to your customers' experience of your company? How are they being valued and how are they being set up to be proud? How are they feeling supported? Time like this, perfect opportunity. Talk to them about, are you okay with your personal finances? Do you want to sit down? Like, is there something I can help you with? Feeling supported is really important. And then being energized by hope. That is when you've got a bunch of people who come in the morning and they're going to crush it and they're going to get the project done and they're really excited. They've come to work hopeful. And that, if you have people who come into work and they're shuffling their feet and they're looking at the ground and deep study of steel-toed boots every time you walk up to them, they're not hopeful. They don't feel valued. They don't believe that they can make a difference. They don't think that they're contributing, and there ain't much in it for them, and they're not feeling supported. So this is a great team, future-proofing team checklist for you to think about each of these different 6 areas. And then I've given you 7 questions to take the team engagement test. And I think if you get to the end of these 7 questions and you've answered everything yes or positive, then go write a book because you've got it nailed. But if you answer any of these without, how clearly do I communicate with others and invite input? How well do I accept and implement ideas from staff? Emphasis on the accept and implement. How do I praise others openly and quickly for making a difference? Openly and quickly. Am I empathetic to and set others up to succeed with pride? How often do I ask others what they need to succeed? You set a crew up at the beginning of the day, and before you leave the site, you say, what do you guys really need from me to succeed today? What else can I do to help you? Holy smokes. Does that ever give a message of team engagement? And then do I create space for everyone to be hopeful and engaged? And then finally, am I ready to allow others to make decisions? There's the piece for all of you who are micromanagers to really think about. When you can empower someone else to actually make a couple of decisions and use your culture, I do a decision tree with clients where we define all the core values, the non-negotiables in a company, and how to actually use those to help people make decisions that are right fit, so they don't have to keep coming to you and texting you and your phone ringing off the hook all day long or off of your hip all day long. I'm showing my age. And how often are you going to be able to delegate and let people actually make decisions successfully? That's a part of team engagement. That's where they feel valued. What's in it for me? How am I appreciated? So, I actually, Dave, was there any more questions that you wanted to ask just before I wrap up?
Yeah, one just popped in. As you started, I think it was
I'll back up.
at the beginning of last slide. Yeah, because I think those last 2 went together. Somebody was asking this. This looks like what the owner would complete.
Mhm.
And if yes, then what? I think they were looking for the next step. Just after they take the self-assessment, get the information back, or at least quantified in a way that it's visual. Then what do you suggest they do from here?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. Um, no, it's not just up to the owner. If I heard you right, this is about the leadership team, and it's actually about your whole team. If your whole team or your company, if you took this as a project, let's say right now you're not out working because of COVID-19 and your district or your region, your state, your province has said you're not essential and you can't work, and you want to improve team engagement. Take 7 days and ask one of these 7 questions to everyone on your team and ask them to come onto a Zoom call or a Google Chat or some sort of online platform and talk about the one question. How well do I do this? Show that humility and ask them for the input and say, okay, if I'm not clearly communicating with you guys and inviting your input, how could I do that differently? I need your ideas. Let's talk about this. So this is whenever there's a no or a not really answer to any 7 of these by the team or by the owner, there's huge room for team engagement improvement. Absolutely huge room. And if you invite them into this process, this is just going to elevate that whole level of team engagement and what's in it for me even higher than you thought it could be. Do you think that answers it, Dave?
Sorry, Jackie, I was
That's
just
okay.
on mute there, trying to be polite with background noise. I do think that that covers it, and that I think is what what we see in any of the dialogue that you've had with organizations is to be encompassing, right? And so
Yeah.
if it's only the owners asking themselves the question and it's only the owners that are taking action with the information, then you can only take that so far. And I really like how you're trying to bring in the rest of the organization in everything that the owner is trying to manage, that the owner is trying to engage with. And it's all about that collaboration and communication at the
Mhm.
end of the day. So completely agree to have a wider expanse with the not just acquisition of the information, but the
Mhm.
deployment of that information. So yeah, that's great.
Cool. Thank you. And I think one of the best things to hit this industry to enable all of this to happen, to give yours to be able for your team to be able to give your company a 10 out of 10 is the LMN platform. When I think about how putting the tools of LMN into the hands of the foreman or the supervisor, and so that the whole crew can see the materials, the time budget, the labor budget for each component of a project, or the labor budget for each site visit and maintenance, you're equipping them and you're giving them the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, we could really crush this if we had this type of mower instead of that type of mower, or if we could do this instead of this, or did this in this order instead of that, or your element is one of the best ways to put the information and equip everyone on your team to engage. If you keep them in the dark and treat them like mushrooms, like the industry used to do, and they didn't have any, everyone on the team didn't have access to information, they had no opportunity to engage. So the more you invite and collaborate with people and share information, the more you're going to get engagement on all levels. And that's where as you know, I'm just so thrilled to be a part of um, Element as an associated coach, because it's just another piece to another tool to set people up to succeed and to allow them to come in with hope and to leave with pride at the end of the day of having hit the targets, hit the metrics, and to know how they're being measured. It's just so important. It's just I think it's a great tool to amp up the team engagement. So I just wanted to leave just at the very end as a business coach, this is what I do. I help people improve. And so in this COVID kind of chaos, if you're shut down for a little while and you want to really try to move this forward, I can help you to first of all modify a COVID budget and go from amber and red and green and different colors of budgets depending on what's happening and changing, and help you just to pivot really quickly and to get to that point of acceptance to move you forward instead of blame keeping you stuck, and to adapt your strategies to the current reality because it's moving fast. It's moving really, really fast. Um, and demystifying that low team accountability and designing a future-proof culture. I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to offer. There, my email address is there, my phone number is there. There's a Calendly link there if you want to click a picture of it. I'll just contact me. Well, let's talk for 15 minutes on the phone and set up a time so we can just see what I can do to help you. I'm happy to offer you just a 15-minute call and see where that can go and see if I can get you on the right track. So I'm just so grateful to LMN for the opportunity to be here with everyone today and to um, talk about team engagement from a different place of where you may have thought I was going to come from. But I hope it's been valuable, and be safe. Thank you so much.
That's great, Jackie. Thank you again for your time. What a power-packed hour. We will make sure that all of the attendees receive the recording of this webinar as well as all of your contact information. We do have some time available if there are any questions to ask Jackie. We just wanted to share one additional slide from LMN. along the lines, Jackie, of what you were sharing from a resource perspective with Landscape Ontario being an incredible hub of information, as are a lot of the other state and national landscape associations. So LMN, our virtual workshops, we've moved those online for greater access, obviously worldwide. Our LMN Academy, also online, continues to provide companies with the best education to help their staff and achieve their company goals. Enhanced customer support. Our team, again, completely dedicated to the landscape industry. That's our pride and joy. And so you get to work with team members that many of them are from industry. So chat, email, phone. Our crew is always really excited to engage business owners with their questions or challenges. And then obviously our webinar series. We have quite a few amazing speakers. But Jackie, what an experience it is to get to work with you. Thank you so much for your time today, and we will make sure that this won't be the last time. Really great messages, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate the opportunity, and you guys just are the best. You're just such a professional team, and you are just such an inspiration. Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Okay, that concludes today's webinar. I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the week, and look for a follow-up note from the LMN team with more information about Jackie's business, Consulting by Hart, and today's recording. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.